Greetings, everybody. I'm trying out a lapel mic for the first time. Freaking upgrades. So I hope this sounds better. But if it doesn't, I'm sorry also. I was gonna vlog the last half of The Pillars of the Earth, and then I kind of got into it, so then I just stopped making videos and ended up reading the last half of it like pretty quickly. So forgive me for that. I wanted to do a wrap up of my experience because obviously I cut off halfway through the book. So I ended up rating it a 4 stars, and the reason why I didn't rate it a 5 was mainly because of the length. So for me, and this is just like ADHD probs, I have a short attention span, and books that are 1,000 pages long do not excite me, which is funny because like I can read like a 500-page book and usually be fine, but really once you like pass 500 pages, I needed to step up. Like I need some action constantly, just because frankly, like it hit 600 pages and I'm like tired of reading this book. I don't know if anyone else gets this. I just, even if I like the book, even if I think it's good, I get like bored of reading the same book. Like I want to move on to another book. It's really rare that I can read a book for like that long of a time, like as long as I think I was reading The Pillars of the Earth for like a solid month. And there's only so long I can read a book without like just being fucking tired of reading it, no matter how good it is. So that was why I rated it a 4 stars as opposed to a 5. Overall, I thought it was superb. The ending in particular was really, really good. I do think that like it definitely picked up after part 1. So part 1 it wasn't boring, but mainly it was just like Tom and his family being poor for 300 pages, which I understand like the purpose of making it that long. In relation to the length of the whole rest of the book, it was, I feel like, a proportionate chunk, but it was still 300 pages of like somebody being poor and not having a job. And also when when I was reading it, the only real plot point I knew was that at one point they were going to build a cathedral. And so my ADHD millennial brain is like, okay, so they should get into the cathedral pretty fucking quick. And then it's like 400 pages later and then they start building the cathedral. And I was like, I get why we need all this buildup, but like, damn, that's a lot of buildup. That's a lot of buildup. But after the first part, it definitely picked up. And it definitely got better in the sense of representation too. I don't think... Okay, so there were parts of the first part of The Pillars of the Earth where I wanted to stop. Like where I debated just stopping reading it altogether. The main one was when Ellen appeared in the forest when like Tom was looking for his baby that he had just abandoned, and like she appeared in a coat like butt-ass naked and they had like weird dream but like real sex. That part like absolutely, I was like, I'm not gonna finish this book. Like this is stupid and messed up and I'm not gonna finish this book. If you can get past that part, and I say this and I like can't even encourage someone to do so because it is, once again, like 350 pages long. So if you can get past the first 300 pages, then it definitely picks up and becomes like cooler. But that's a lot of pages to go through. Then again, if you're the kind of person who's willing to pick up a book that's almost 1,000 pages long, then maybe you're already there, you know? Maybe you're already along for the ride. But I thought that all of the characters had like just really great character arcs. I really loved how everybody came into themselves. Even characters that I didn't like particularly like Richard. Like I never really liked Richard. At the end of the book, I still didn't like Richard. I think that it was interesting that he was kind of just a little bit of a waste of space. Like he wasn't a waste of space, but he was he was a character that was good for one thing and like one thing only. And as soon as he couldn't do that one thing, he became a waste of space. I think because I was pro Aliena throughout the book, like Richard was an issue because he just wasted her money and then didn't give her anything and then yelled at her when she was in financial ruin, even though she pulled him out of like a horrible situation by being like brutally raped. But whatever, Richard. So like there were characters like that where it was like, I don't like you. I'm still impressed by the character arc that was developed for you and by the opportunities. Follett like created these opportunities for every character to shine. And sometimes that shining wasn't good. William, like no one wanted him to shine. Even still, at one point, the highest version of his character, which was like a gigantic dick, but he still reached that point, if that makes sense. And like for Richard, when he was battling with the king or when he was given the job as like sheriff of Kingsbridge, I felt like he was given, like Follett was giving this character just a little pocket of opportunity to like be the most themselves. And I thought that was really cool that he was able to do that with like everybody. I also loved that everybody kind of had a high and a low point. And all of it was very to that character's truth. So I think that Follett's strong suit absolutely was making these characters who were so detailed. Like he lived with these characters for so long that the reader really gets a feel for every aspect of their person. My sister has this really strong belief that knowing someone, like knowing them truly, it becomes impossible not to love them. And I like it in the sense of the Pillars of the Earth, because even with characters like Richard, I'm not going to go as far as William, but even with characters like Richard, who I don't like, I still can understand why his family members have love for him. I still can understand where he's coming from. I don't think that if we were two people who like met up in a bar that I would really want anything to do with him. At the same time, like I was able to develop a respect for a character who in real life I wouldn't like at all. And I think that that's kind of cool. Like that's cool of King Follett to make me feel for like this really shitty white man. You know what I mean? I think about Prior Philip, and Prior Philip and Jack were such like great foils of each other throughout the book, especially in Jack's adulthood. Up until the point where Prior Philip messed up with Jack, I felt like the main complaint for Prior Philip's character was that he was like too good. Like he was like too holy, too judicious, too good at his job. You know, it was like all these like complaints that he was excellent, essentially. And when he fails Jack, I think that it was a really low point for his character, but it was also crazy important. It took him down a few pegs to realize that he could fuck up, and to realize that his plan, like his master plan for how everything should go. Because Prior Philip was a character who had so much control. He had control of himself, he had control of his priory, he was really good at organizing and managing and getting what he needed to get done in a fair way for the people that he cared about. It's easy to have respect for a character like that, because as complaints in the beginning of the book were, like he's too good at his job. And for him to fail Jack and then to continuously fail Jack, I thought really, one, heightened Ellen's take, which was such a fun take in the 12th century where everybody was religious, to heighten this idea that religiosity can be messed up, and to heighten that plot point while also bringing about just a little bit of Prior Philip's downfall was like just a beautiful hot take. I think that Ken Follett really took a period of time that can be hard for a modern reader to understand, and modernized it in a way that was historically accurate, if that makes sense. So a lot of the times, like, I'm thinking, because I'm mainly a high fantasy reader, a lot of the times, like, high fantasy authors will be like, oh, well, this is sexist because it's based on the Middle Ages, and the Middle Ages was sexist. And they don't really try to make it less sexist, and they don't acknowledge that they're talking about an alternate history, because, like, in a place where there's dragons, does there really have to be sexism? You know what I mean? Like, you can't say that you're really talking about the Middle Ages, because the Middle Ages didn't really have dragons, you know? And I think that Ken Follett, in an absolutely beautiful historical novel, really looked at this and approached it in the way that I think that most historians, modern historians, and specifically feminist historians, like talking about history, in the sense that, you know, there's this idea that women throughout history were, like, fine with being repressed, or had, like, different personalities than women in today's society. And that's just not true. Like, people have had pretty much the same kind of personality traits forever. People have been pretty much the same forever. Like, you're gonna have people who are gonna go with the flow, you're gonna have people who aren't. Like, it's not rocket science to assume just because historically culture has changed does not mean that characteristics of human beings have changed. It's just that sociologically those characteristics were represented in different ways. And I think that characters like Ellen and Aliena really showed feminism in a modern light from a 12th century perspective. We have women who aren't cool with religion. We have women who had to deal with the fact that the father of their child was killed for no reason. We have to deal with women who were educated and knew that their place in the world was absolutely governed by people who didn't always have their best interests at heart. Like, historically, we know that there were women like Aliena who had to essentially carry their family's financial burden. This is something that we see today. This is something that we've seen always. The idea that there were periods of history where, like, women didn't work has really only been for, like, gentry class women. And I think we can see that with Aliena in the sense of the beginning with her amount of privilege and the fact that she was permitted to choose her spouse, and the fact that her father educated her further than anyone would expect her to, are all signifiers of her class. And then for her to fall into poverty and to have to learn how to work, that whole sequence of them realizing that all of their skills aren't skills to the impoverished classes was so informative, and such a good discussion on economics in this time period. It didn't really matter. Aliena had to find work, and she had to hustle harder than anybody in order to get it done. And watching her progress is, in a lot of ways, accurate to what women of that time period would have to do in that situation. It's not absolutely unheard of for a woman to own business. She would just have to interact with people in a way that Aliena would have to. Like, in a sexist way. Like, in the sexist environment, they could do it, but only at the brink of poverty, where they kind of permitted that. I thought that that discussion on the differences of feminism and sexism depending on class was just so fucking crisp. I think that a lot of times people don't add it, especially in books. I think that Pillars of the Earth was written in like 1989 or like the early 90s. And to like include that was like, yes. So I think, like, historically speaking, this book was absolutely thrilling. Like, historically speaking, this book was a 5-star book. It was beautifully researched. It, like, from the clothes down. Like, and freaking everyone always forgets about the clothes. Ken Follett did his research all the way through. And I just adored it. So my background, I hit the mic. My background is in ancient architecture, or in ancient history but I'm going to be talking about architecture now. So my background is in ancient history, and when they started talking about the vaulted ceilings in cathedrals, I lost my mind. I was so excited, because essentially what they were talking about was, so at one point, Jack ends up going to France to look for his father. He ends up in Spain and whatnot. He's looking for his dad, and in the process, he's looking at all of these new cathedrals. And so we see a shift into the Gothic Cathedral, which is really big spires, beautiful vaulted ceilings, huge stained glass windows, and a shift away from kind of the bulky, stone fortified kind of building. And what's really fun about this from an ancient architecture perspective is that the things that Jack was talking about were things that in the ancient time periods they knew. And these were things that had to be relearned because in the Middle Ages things kind of fell to crap. So Jack talking about how vaulted ceilings can work and the wonder of the vaulted ceiling being made out of stone and yet somehow be supported in itself. The whole question of how to get the ceiling to not collapse on itself was so thrilling to me. It was so fun to see because it was a real issue during that time period, and also because this is something that we can still see today in ancient times. So freaking the Pantheon is a great example of how ancient people dealt with this same issue. And it reminds the modern reader that these kind of ceilings are crazy hard to build. Mathematically, materialistically, we take for granted that we can do these wild things architecturally. But during the Middle Ages and during the ancient period, these questions were absolutely explosive when they were answered. So essentially at one point, Jack's talking about how they build the ceiling by kind of tiering it. So they have these pillars, he calls them ribs. So they have these ribs that come down, and then in between the ribs are lighter stones. So you have the part that's structural, and then the part that's light so that the structure doesn't collapse on itself. And the way that the Pantheon dealt with this in the ancient period, because the Pantheon is a giant dome, and making a big ass dome is crazy hard for the same reason that making a vaulted ceiling is crazy hard, because how do you not get it to collapse in on itself? And they do the same thing. They make these ribs that are then covered up, and in between they had lighter cement. So you have these big brick columns and fucking lighter cement, and then in the Pantheon they had these gorgeous inlets that essentially just took more space away from the parts that were going to need to be supported. So that whole encounter with the architecture was so exciting. It was so exciting to see discussions on how they would have done this and how it would have how it can work and why it's so hard. And I think it's just, for me, it made me so happy to see the same question brought up again. I think as somebody who's spent most of their life studying ancient history, sometimes we forget that after the Roman period, Europe kind of fell apart. And all of this knowledge was absolutely lost and had to be rediscovered. So it's so exciting to see the same question crop up and the same solution crop up, and know that there's a resilience to humanity. It just makes me excited to be human, if that makes sense. I know that's stupid about a vaulted ceiling, but it does. It makes me excited. So 5 out of 5 for historicism. Lengthwise, dear God, I gotta say, y'all, I don't know how to better describe it than how it's been described to me. And I also don't know what to say to people to recommend this, except that it's gorgeous to read. And that doesn't help anybody. And I remember starting this journey, I was fucking, how come no one has anything to say about this book? And I get it now, and I wish that I had a different solution. But truly, it's beautiful because it is about a whole town full of people building a cathedral. And that's the whole plot. And you're like, for 900 pages, Alex? And I'm like, yeah, for 900 pages. And is it boring in the beginning? Yes. Yes, it is. But God, is it not satisfying to get to that end? Like, I was like tearing up at the end. Like, it's the like beautiful like crap. Like, damn, Ken. Damn, you know?